In the heart of Manhattan's most exclusive district stands a mansion that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. $20 million of architectural perfection, marble imported from Italy, chandeliers from France. Every surface gleams with the kind of wealth that most people only see in magazines. Yet tonight, as rain streaks down the floor-to-ceiling windows, this house feels more like a mausoleum than a home. In the largest bedroom on the second floor, 6-year-old Levi Malden sits cross-legged on Persian carpet, worth more than a teacher's annual salary. Around him are scattered the remnants of what was once a beautiful family portrait, torn into pieces so small they look like fallen snow. In his tiny hands he holds a black crayon, methodically coloring over a drawing pad. Black. Always black. Every drawing, every picture, every attempt at art has been consumed by that same endless darkness. The only sound in this $20 million silence is the soft scraping of crayon against paper. Scrape, scrape, scrape. A rhythm as steady and haunting as a funeral march. Downstairs, behind mahogany doors that cost more than most cars, Jareth Malden sits in his study. 38 years old, worth $400 million, commanding an empire that spans 3 continents. Forbes has featured him on 3 covers. Harvard Business School teaches case studies about his strategies, yet tonight he stares at a photograph on his desk, a picture of a woman with gentle eyes and a smile that once made him believe in forever. Sarah Malden, wife, mother, gone. 2 years. It's been 2 years since the accident that shattered more than just bones and metal. 2 years since Levi stopped speaking in complete sentences. 2 years since laughter disappeared from this house like smoke in the wind. And in all that time, Jareth has done what he knows best. He has worked. Meetings, acquisitions, board decisions, profit margins. He has buried himself so deep in success that he's forgotten what failure feels like. But failure, it seems, has been waiting for him at home all along. The morning comes with the precision of a Swiss watch and the warmth of a January grave. Mrs. Henderson moves through the mansion like a ghost, her footsteps muffled by expensive rugs that muffle more than sound. They muffle the cries of a family that has forgotten how to be a family. Jareth's morning routine is clockwork. Coffee at 6 a.m., black, 2 sugars served in a cup that belonged to his grandfather. The Wall Street Journal at 6:15, stock reports at 6:30, and at exactly 6:45 he walks past Levi's room on his way to the garage, where his driver waits with the engine running. Today, like every day for the past 2 years, Jareth pauses at his son's door. His hand hovers over the handle for exactly 3 seconds. He's counted. Before he convinces himself that Levi is better off sleeping, better off with Mrs. Henderson, better off without a father who has forgotten how to be anything but a CEO. But this morning is different. This morning, as Jareth's hand touches the door handle, it swings open. Levi stands there in Spider-Man pajamas that are too small for him now. Sarah had bought them, and somehow, no one has had the heart to replace them. The little boy looks up at his father with eyes that hold too much understanding for someone who should still believe in monsters under the bed. "Daddy," Levi whispers, and the word hangs in the air like a prayer in an empty church. Jareth's briefcase feels suddenly heavy in his hand. His phone buzzes, probably Marcus from the Tokyo office, probably about the merger that could secure his company's future for the next decade. The phone buzzes again. "I'm late for a meeting, buddy," Jareth says, and he hates himself for the word buddy. Distant and safe, the kind of word you use with the neighbor's kid, not your own son. Levi doesn't move, doesn't blink, just stands there with his small hand gripping the doorframe, as if he's holding on to keep the world from spinning away beneath his feet. Can you stay for breakfast?" Levi asks, and his voice is so quiet that Jareth almost pretends he didn't hear it. The phone buzzes a 3rd time, then a 4th. "Maybe tonight," Jareth says, knowing it's a lie. Tonight there will be another meeting, another crisis, another reason to stay away from the wreckage of his family. He walks away. He always walks away, and Levi, sweet, broken Levi, stands in his doorway and watches his father disappear down the marble staircase. When the front door closes with its soft, expensive click, Levi goes back to his room and picks up his black crayon. Scrape, scrape, scrape. In the kitchen, Mrs. Henderson pretends she didn't hear the conversation. She's been with the family for 15 years, since before Levi was born, since back when this house was filled with laughter and Christmas mornings and birthday parties that lasted until midnight. Now, she makes breakfast for a little boy who eats in silence and a grandfather who watches helplessly from his wheelchair in the corner. Old Mr. Malden, Jareth's father, sits by the window like a sentry guarding memories. 82 years old, his body failing but his mind sharp as the day he built his first company from nothing. He watches his grandson push scrambled eggs around his plate and sees his own son making the same mistakes he made 40 years ago. "I failed, my boy," the old man whispers to Mrs. Henderson when Levi goes back upstairs. "I chose work over love, money over moments, and now he's doing the same damn thing." Mrs. Henderson doesn't answer. What is there to say? That history repeats itself? That some wounds pass from father to son like an inheritance nobody wants? Outside, Manhattan rushes by in its eternal hurry, millions of people racing toward millions of destinations, and none of them knowing that in this beautiful house, 3 generations of Malden men are slowly drowning in their own silence. 40 blocks away, in a neighborhood where the rent costs more per month than most people make in a year, Amira Talise closes the door to her small apartment and takes a breath that tastes like freedom and responsibility in equal measure. 34 years old, with skin that carries the warmth of her Jamaican grandmother and eyes that have seen too much pain to ever be unkind. Amira moves through the world like someone who has learned that healing happens not in the grand gestures, but in the quiet moments between heartbeats. Her apartment is small, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that's really just a hallway with appliances, but it's filled with light. Plants crowd every windowsill, their green leaves reaching toward the sun like prayers made visible. Photographs cover the walls, not of vacations or achievements, but of moments. A child's first smile after months of therapy. An elderly man learning to walk again after a stroke. A teenage girl laughing for the first time since her parents' divorce. These are Amira's victories. Small and visible to the world, but real as sunrise. In the corner of her living room, in a bed that takes up too much space, but not nearly enough of her heart, sleeps her younger brother, Marcus. 26 years old, born with cerebral palsy that took his mobility, but never touched his spirit. He's the reason Amira became a nurse. He's the reason she specializes in trauma therapy for children. He's the reason she understands that love isn't something you feel. It's something you do every day, even when you're tired, especially when you're tired. "Morning sunshine," Marcus says without opening his eyes, because he always knows when she's watching him. "Morning troublemaker," she says back. And it's their ritual, the same words every day for 10 years, since the day she brought him home from the care facility that was slowly killing his spirit. Amira has been caring for Marcus since she was 24, since the day she realized that love isn't about what you get, it's about what you give. She's never married, never had children of her own, never even dated seriously. Every man she's ever met eventually asks the same question. What about your own life? As if caring for Marcus isn't a life. As if love has to be traditional to be real. But lately, on nights when Marcus sleeps peacefully and the apartment is quiet, except for the hum of the city outside, Amira finds herself wondering about the children she'll never have, the family she'll never build, the part of her heart that remains empty, waiting for something she can't quite name. Her phone rings. Mrs. Henderson's voice is tight with worry. "Amira, I'm sorry to call so early, but it's Mr. Malden, the older Mr. Malden. He's asking for you." Amira knows this call was coming. 3 months ago, she spent 6 weeks helping old Mr. Malden recover from a mild stroke that left his left side weak and his pride wounded. She taught him to walk again, to hold a coffee cup, to write his own name. But more than that, she listened to his stories about building a business empire and losing a family in the process. "He says it's urgent," Mrs. Henderson continues. "About his grandson." Amira looks at Marcus, who's now sitting up in bed, concern written across his face. "Go," Marcus says simply. "Someone needs you. But your physical therapy appointment can be rescheduled." Amira. Marcus reaches for her hand. You have a gift, and gifts aren't meant to be hoarded. 30 minutes later, Amira stands outside. The Malden mansion, her small bag of medical supplies feeling inadequate against the grandeur before her. She's been here before, of course, during old Mr. Malden's recovery, but today, something feels different. Today, the house seems to be holding its breath. The scream that shatters the afternoon silence isn't quite human. It's the sound of a 6-year-old heart breaking in real time, a wail that seems to come from somewhere deeper than lungs, somewhere more primal than grief. Mrs. Henderson finds Levi in Sarah's old closet, surrounded by clothes that still smell faintly of lavender perfume, and dreams that died too young. In his small hands, he clutches a silk scarf, powder blue, the color of sky on the day he was born. Sarah wore it to the hospital the day Levi came into the world. She wore it to his first Christmas, his first steps, his first day of preschool. Now Levi holds it against his face and screams like the world is ending, because for him, it already did. "Mama," he cries, and the word is broken glass and starlight. Hope and despair twisted together into something that tears holes in the universe. "Mama, mama, mama." Mrs. Henderson tries to approach, but Levi shrinks back, the scarf clutched so tightly his knuckles are white. His breathing comes in short, sharp gasps, the beginning of what she recognizes as a panic attack. "Call his father," she tells Rosa, the younger housekeeper. "Mr. Malden is in a board meeting. He said not to disturb. I don't care if he's meeting with the president. Call him now." But even as Rosa dials, Mrs. Henderson knows how this will go. Jareth will be in the middle of something crucial. He'll ask if it's life-threatening. When told it's not, he'll suggest calling the pediatrician, or maybe increasing Levi's therapy sessions. He won't come home. He never comes home for things like this. That's when Mrs. Henderson remembers the card in her wallet, the one with Amira's number. 20 minutes later, Amira walks into chaos. Levi is now hyperventilating, his small body shaking with sobs that seem too big for someone so little. Mrs. Henderson hovers nearby, helpless. Rosa wrings her hands in the doorway. And in the corner, old Mr. Malden sits in his wheelchair, tears streaming down his weathered face. Amira doesn't say anything at first. She just sits on the floor cross-legged about 3 feet away from Levi, close enough to help, far enough away not to frighten him more than he already is. She doesn't try to take the scarf, doesn't tell him to calm down, doesn't promise that everything will be okay. Instead, she begins to hum. It's an old Jamaican lullaby her grandmother used to sing, a melody that speaks of islands and peace and love that doesn't disappear just because someone can't see it anymore. Her voice is soft, barely audible over Levi's cries, but somehow it reaches him. Slowly, so slowly that at first no one notices. Levi's breathing begins to match the rhythm of her song. "Your mama," Amira says quietly, still humming between words. "She picked that scarf because it reminded her of the sky the day you were born." Levi's sobs quiet to hiccups. "She told me," Amira continues, "and this is a lie, but it's the kind of lie that serves love, that whenever you missed her, you could look at that scarf and remember that the sky connects everything. She's still there, baby, just in a different part of the sky." And then, for the first time in 2 years, Levi stops crying and lets someone other than Mrs. Henderson come close. He doesn't let go of the scarf, but he lets Amira sit beside him, and when she opens her arms, he falls into them like he's been waiting his whole life for someone to catch him. "Safe," Amira whispers into his hair. "You're safe. You're loved." And love doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. It's exactly 4:47 p.m. when Jareth Malden walks through his front door and finds his son sleeping peacefully in the arms of a woman he barely remembers. The scene before him defies everything he thought he knew about his son's capacity for trust. For 2 years, Levi has flinched away from strangers, retreated into silence when new people entered their space, built walls around his heart that seemed impenetrable. Yet here he is, curled against this woman like she's been part of his life. Forever. Jareth stands frozen in the doorway, his expensive briefcase suddenly feeling like an anchor dragging him down into the recognition of his own failures. The merger documents inside, worth millions of dollars requiring his immediate attention, seem insignificant compared to the peace on his son's face. "What happened here?" he asks again, but this time his voice carries less authority and more bewilderment. Amira looks up at him with those patient, dark eyes, and for a moment neither speaks. The silence stretches between them, filled with the weight of unasked questions and uncomfortable truths. In this woman's arms, his son has found something that 2 years of expensive therapy sessions and child psychologists couldn't provide: the simple comfort of being understood. "Sometimes," Amira says quietly, careful not to wake the sleeping child, "healing happens when we least expect it, when we stop trying to control it and just allow it." Her words hit him like a diagnosis he's been avoiding. Control. That's what he's been trying to do: control his grief, control his son's healing, control the timeline of their recovery. But control, he's beginning to realize, is just fear dressed. Up in business suits, Mrs. Henderson approaches with a soft blanket, and together she and Amira carefully transfer Levi to the small sofa in the corner of the closet. The little boy stirs slightly but doesn't wake, one small hand still clutching the blue scarf like a lifeline to love that transcends death. "He's been asking about you," Mrs. Henderson tells Jareth quietly. "Every day. When is Daddy coming home? Will Daddy eat dinner with me tonight? Does Daddy still love me even though Mama's gone?" Each question is a knife to Jareth's chest. How has he let his son doubt his love? How has work become more important than the one person who should matter most? "I've been trying to provide for him," Jareth says weakly. "He doesn't need providing," Amira replies with gentle firmness. "He needs presence. He needs to know that his father chooses him every day, not just when convenient." The truth in her words is undeniable. For 2 years, Jareth has been choosing everything else: board meetings, conference calls, strategic planning sessions, over the simple act of being present for his grieving son. "I don't know how," he admits, and the confession feels like stepping off a cliff. "I don't know how to be what he needs." "You don't have to be perfect," Amira says, rising carefully so as not to disturb Levi. "You just have to be present. You just have to show up and stay." Old Mr. Malden wheels his chair closer, his weathered hands gripping the armrests with the intensity of someone who has lived long enough to recognize profound moments when they arrive. "Son," he says, his voice carrying the weight of his own. "Regrets. This woman has given you a gift. She's shown you what love looks like when it's not afraid of itself. Don't waste it." Jareth looks at his father, seeing not the successful businessman but the man who made similar choices decades ago, who chose empire over intimacy and spent his later years understanding the true cost of that decision. "What do I do?" Jareth asks. And for the first time in 2 years, he's asking for help instead of asserting control. "You start showing up," Amira says simply. "You start choosing him. You start believing that love is stronger than fear." As if summoned by the conversation about him, Levi begins to stir. His eyes flutter open, unfocused at first, then settling on his father's face with a mixture of hope and uncertainty that breaks Jareth's heart all over again. "Daddy?" Levi's voice is small, confused. "You came home early." "I came home for you," Jareth says, and means it with an intensity that surprises him. "I'm sorry it took me so long." Levi sits up slowly, the blue scarf still in his hands, looking between his father and Amira, as if trying to understand this new dynamic, this possibility that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. "Miss Amira helped me stop being scared," he says softly. "She says Mama's love is still here, just in a different shape." Jareth kneels beside the sofa, bringing himself to his son's eye level for the first time in months. "What shape is it now?" Levi considers this question with the seriousness he brings to all important matters. I think it's in the sky that connects everything, and in the people who choose to love me even when I'm sad, and maybe in new people who come to help us remember how to be happy." He looks at Amira as he says this last part, and the simple trust in his gaze makes clear that this woman has become more than a therapist or helper. She's become family in the way that matters most. Jareth follows his son's gaze to Amira, seeing her not as the stranger who disrupted his controlled world, but as the woman who saved his family when he couldn't save them himself. "Thank you," he says, and the words carry more weight than any contract he's ever signed. "Don't thank me yet." Amira replies with a smile that suggests she understands the work ahead. This is just the beginning, and as the late afternoon light filters through the windows of Sarah's closet, illuminating the three of them in golden warmth, Jareth Malden begins to understand that some beginnings require an ending first, the end of the man who thought love was a luxury he could afford after everything else was secure. Today, in this moment, that man begins to die, and in his place, something new begins to grow. A father who chooses presence over profit, love over legacy, connection over control. The grandfather clock in the foyer strikes 5, as Jareth Malden steps into his own house and feels like a stranger. His Italian leather shoes click against marble floors that suddenly seem too cold, too perfect, too much like a museum and not enough like a home. The sound echoes through the vast space, announcing his arrival to empty rooms that no longer hold the warmth of welcome. He followed Mrs. Henderson's frantic text messages from his car, abandoning a $400 million merger discussion mid-sentence. The board members from Singapore are probably still sitting in that conference room, wondering where their host disappeared to, consulting their watches and their translators, trying to understand American business etiquette that allows a CEO to simply vanish during the most important negotiation of the fiscal year. His phone has been buzzing non-stop. His assistant, Jennifer, his lawyers from 3 different firms, his board members who don't understand why their fearless leader suddenly became unreachable. Each notification feels like an anchor, trying to drag him back to the safe, predictable world of spreadsheets and strategic planning, where problems have solutions and emotions don't interfere with quarterly projections. But all of that fades when he sees the scene in Sarah's old closet. Levi is curled against Amira's chest, like a kitten finding warmth after a storm, his small body completely relaxed for the first time in months. The blue scarf is still clutched in his hands, but loosely now, no longer a desperate lifeline, but a comfort object, shared with someone who understands its significance. His breathing is even and peaceful, his face unmarked by the tear tracks that have become his constant companion, and this woman, this stranger, sits there like she belongs, like she's been part of their family for years instead of hours. Her dark hair falls around her face as she looks down at the sleeping child, and there's something in her expression that Jareth hasn't seen directed toward his son in 2 years. Unguarded love. Jareth recognizes her now, vaguely. The nurse who helped his father during those difficult weeks after the stroke. He remembers paying her bills, remembers writing a thank you note his assistant composed and he signed without reading, but he doesn't remember her face being so present, so completely focused on his son like nothing else in the world matters, not even the obvious wealth surrounding them or the powerful man standing in the doorway. What's going on here? Jareth's voice cuts through the quiet like a blade, sharper than he intended, carrying all the frustration and fear and guilt that have been building in his chest since he left that conference room. Amira looks up slowly, and her eyes, dark brown and infinitely patient, meet his without flinching. She doesn't jump up, doesn't apologize for being in his house, doesn't defer to his obvious authority. She just holds his gaze with a steadiness that makes him uncomfortable, like she can see through all his expensive armor to the scared, guilty man underneath. "Your son needed someone," she says simply, and the words hit him like a physical blow. "That's what I pay people for." The response comes out harsher than he meant, defensive and cold, the voice he uses in boardrooms when someone questions his decisions. "Mrs. Henderson, what happened here?" Mrs. Henderson steps forward, wringing her hands in the way she does when she's trying not to say something that will get her fired. She's been with wealthy families long enough to know that honesty and employment don't always coexist peacefully. Levi found the scarf in Mrs. Malden's closet, she explains carefully. "He had a panic attack. I called you, but I was in a meeting." "You're always in a meeting," old Mr. Malden speaks from his wheelchair, his voice carrying 40 years of similar excuses, 40 years of choosing business over presence. The old man's words hang in the air like an accusation that can't be defended against because it's true. Jareth has been in meetings during every crisis, every milestone, every moment when his son needed a father instead of a provider. Amira carefully shifts Levi so she can stand without waking him. When she rises, she's smaller than Jareth expected, barely, reaching his shoulder. But something about her presence fills the room anyway. She moves with the confidence of someone who knows her own worth, who doesn't measure herself against other people's expectations. "Who called you?" Jareth asks, though he already knows the answer. "I did," Mrs. Henderson admits, lifting her chin with defiance, "because Levi needed help, and you weren't available. I'm here now. Are you?" Amira's question is quiet, but it hits like a thunderclap. Because being in the same building as your son isn't the same as being with him. The audacity of this woman, this stranger, questioning his parenting, makes Jareth's jaw tighten. His hands clench into fists at his sides, a physical response to having his failures pointed out by someone who has no right to judge him, no understanding of the pressures he faces, the responsibilities that rest on his shoulders. "I don't recall asking for your opinion about my family," he says, his voice dropping to the tone that makes board members sit up straighter, that signals the end of discussion and the beginning of consequences. "Your family asked for my help," Amira replies calmly, unmoved by his corporate intimidation tactics. "And I came. What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," she says, lifting Levi gently into her arms with the practiced ease of someone who knows how to move sleeping children, "that I was called here to care for your son, not to make you comfortable." Levi stirs slightly at the transfer, and both adults freeze, their conflict suspended in the face of the child's needs. But the little boy just shifts closer to Amira's warmth and continues sleeping, his small hand still gripping the blue scarf like an anchor to his mother's memory. "He trusts you," Jareth observes, and there's something in his voice that might be wonder or might be envy. When did his son stop trusting him? When did he become someone to be endured rather than someone to run to? "Children recognize safety," Amira says, her voice softer now as she cradles the sleeping boy. "They don't care about your stock portfolio or your board meetings. They care about who shows up when they're scared." The words hit their mark with surgical precision. Jareth thinks about all the times he's missed, soccer games where Levi scored his first goal and looked to empty bleachers, bedtime stories interrupted, by phone calls that couldn't wait until morning, simple moments that seemed less important than quarterly reports. He thinks about Sarah, who used to tell him that success without family is just expensive loneliness. "I provide for him," Jareth says, but even he can hear how weak it sounds, how inadequate material provision seems when measured against emotional presence. "Providing isn't parenting," Amira replies, and her voice carries the weight of experience, of years spent with children whose parents confused giving things with giving themselves. "Any stranger with money can provide. Only a father can parent." The silence that follows is heavy with truth neither of them wants to acknowledge. Jareth stares at his son sleeping in this woman's arms and realizes that Levi hasn't looked that peaceful in his presence for 2 years. Every interaction between father and son has been stilted, careful, marked by Levi's growing certainty that his father doesn't really want to be bothered with the messy business of childhood grief. "Look," Jareth says finally, running a hand through his hair, "I appreciate what you did today, but this situation, it's complicated. I have responsibilities." "So does he," Amira interrupts, nodding toward Levi. "He has the responsibility of being 6 years old and missing his mother and trying to figure out why his father disappeared when she did." "I didn't disappear. I'm right here. Your body is here," Amira says quietly. "But where are you? Where is the man who used to chase him through these halls? Where is the father who used to read him bedtime stories? Where is the person who loved him before grief made love feel dangerous?" Each question lands like a physical blow. How does this stranger know about bedtime stories and games of chase? How can she see so clearly into a family she met only hours ago? "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," Jareth says, falling back on the explanation that has justified 2 years of emotional absence. "The responsibility of running a company, of providing for everyone who depends on me, I understand that responsibility to your company feels safer than responsibility to your son, Amira replies with devastating accuracy, because companies are predictable. They respond to money and strategy and control. Children require presence and vulnerability and faith. Jareth stands abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooks the garden where Sarah used to grow flowers with Levi, where they used to have picnics on summer afternoons when the world still made sense. He can see his reflection in the glass. Expensive suit, perfect haircut, the armor of success that has become his identity. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," he says, his voice tight with frustration. "You don't get to come into my house and analyze my choices. You don't know what it's like to lose everything that matters and still have to keep functioning, keep making decisions that affect thousands of people." "You're right," Amira says, rising with Levi still in her arms. "I don't. But Levi gets to have an advocate who sees him clearly. And what I see is a little boy who's healing beautifully until his father gets scared and pulls away." "I'm not pulling away. You're in your study by 8 every night," Amira says, her voice still calm but relentless in its honesty. "You take calls during dinner. You haven't once asked to see his feelings journal, even though he's been hoping you would for weeks." The accuracy of her observations silences him. How does she know about the study? About the calls, about hopes he wasn't even aware his son harbored? "I'll finish out this week," Amira continues, moving toward the door with careful steps that won't wake the child in her arms. "But then you need to decide what kind of father you want to be, because Levi is going to remember these months for the rest of his life. He's going to remember whether his daddy chose to show up or chose to hide." She pauses at the doorway, turning back to face him one more time. "For what it's worth," she says softly, "I think you're a better man than you're letting yourself be. I think your wife would want you to stop punishing yourself for surviving. And I think Levi needs his father more than he needs your guilt." After she leaves, transferring Levi gently to Mrs. Henderson's care, Jareth sits alone in Sarah's closet until nearly midnight, surrounded by clothes that still smell like lavender, and regret, staring at torn photographs and wondering when he became so afraid of love. 3 days pass before Amira returns, and in those 3 days Jareth finds himself thinking about her words more than about his company's stock price. The Singapore deal fell through. The investors interpreted his sudden departure as lack of commitment, chose to partner with a rival firm whose CEO stayed in the room until the contracts were signed. It should have been a devastating blow, the kind of loss that would normally consume his thoughts for weeks. Instead, he keeps hearing Amira's voice. Where is the man who used to chase him through these halls? When Mrs. Henderson mentions that she's invited Amira back to work with Levi through his trauma, Jareth doesn't object. He tells himself it's because the boy clearly needs professional help, because the panic attacks can't continue, because something has to change. He doesn't examine why he feels a strange anticipation at the thought of seeing her again, why her unflinching honesty feels more like relief than criticism. Amira arrives on Wednesday afternoon, carrying a canvas bag filled with art supplies and a patience that seems infinite. She finds Levi in the sunroom, sitting by the window with his usual black crayon and blank paper, creating the same dark artwork that has become his signature for 2 years. The sunroom was Sarah's favorite space. In the house, floor-to-ceiling windows, plants everywhere, comfortable chairs arranged to catch the afternoon light. She used to paint here while Levi napped, watercolor landscapes that captured light like trapped sunshine. Now the easel sits empty, covered with a sheet like a ghost of abandoned dreams. "Want to try something different today?" Amira asks, settling beside him on the floor with an ease that suggests she belongs here, that she's not intimidated by the wealth surrounding them or careful about preserving expensive furniture. Levi shakes his head automatically, but he doesn't move away. It's the first sign of progress, the willingness to stay in proximity to change, even while refusing to participate in it. Amira pulls out a set of watercolors, not the expensive kind that line the shelves of Levi's playroom, still in their original packaging, but simple, honest colors that respond to emotion rather than technique. These paints are worn, well used, carrying the fingerprints of dozens of children who have found healing through art. "Your mama," Amira says, beginning to paint with slow, deliberate strokes. What was her favorite color? Levi looks up, surprised. Adults don't usually ask him about Mama. They get uncomfortable when he mentions her, change the subject, act like talking about her might make him sadder than he already is. But this woman speaks about his mother like she's still real, still important, still part of his story instead of just part of his past. Blue, he whispers, and the word comes out like a secret he's been keeping. Like the sky. Show me, Amira says, offering him a brush loaded with azure paint. For the first time in 2 years, Levi picks up something other than a black crayon. The blue he paints is tentative at first, just a small stroke in the corner of the paper, as if he's testing whether color is still allowed in his world. But then he adds another stroke, and another. The brush feels foreign in his small fingers after so many months of gripping crayons until his knuckles went white. But there's something liberating about the way watercolor flows, how it spreads and blends and creates unexpected beauty, even when he doesn't know exactly what he's doing. She liked flowers, Levi says suddenly, his voice gaining strength. Yellow ones, in the garden. She called them her sunshine flowers because they turned their faces to follow the sun all day long. Paint them, Amira encourages, offering him a brush dipped in golden yellow, and slowly, wonderfully, color begins to return to Levi's world. They paint for 2 hours, and in that time, Levi says more words than he's spoken in months. He tells Amira about the butterfly garden his mother planted, where monarchs would stop during their migration, and Sarah would point out their wing patterns like she was reading a beautiful book. He talks about the way she used to sing while she cooked, not because she had a good voice, but because she said food tastes better when it's made with music. He describes how she always let him lick the spoon when she made cookies, how she would pretend to be shocked when he got frosting on his nose, how she called him her little sous chef when he helped her in the kitchen. She sounds wonderful, Amira says, and there's no sadness in her voice, no pity, just genuine appreciation for the woman Levi is describing. She was the best mama in the world, Levi replies, and for the first time in 2 years, he smiles when he talks about her. It's a small smile, tentative and brief, but it's real. It's the first crack in the wall he's built around his heart. This is the scene Jareth walks into when he comes home early from work, an unprecedented event that has his assistant calling every 10 minutes to make sure he hasn't been kidnapped or suffered some kind of medical emergency. Jennifer doesn't understand why her boss, who once worked through food poisoning and a sprained ankle, suddenly left the office at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. His son is laughing. Actually laughing, a sound Jareth had begun to think he might never hear. Again. Levi's face is streaked with paint, blue on his cheek, yellow on his forehead, and he's giggling as Amira helps him paint what appears to be a rainbow made entirely of butterflies. "Daddy!" Levi calls out when he sees his father, and there's genuine joy in his voice, the kind of excitement that used to greet Jareth every evening before the world fell apart. "Look, I painted Mama's garden." Jareth kneels beside them, studying, the painting with the attention he usually reserves for quarterly reports. It's chaotic and beautiful and alive, everything his house hasn't been for 2 years. The butterflies are lopsided and the flowers are anatomically impossible, but there's joy in every brushstroke, hope in every color. "Hey, it's perfect," he says, and means it more than he's meant anything in months. Miss Amira says colors have feelings, Levi explains, with the seriousness that children bring to important revelations. Red is brave and yellow is happy and blue is missing someone but still loving them. Jareth looks at Amira, who's watching this interaction with quiet intensity, her dark eyes taking in every nuance of the relationship between father and son. That's very wise. Children understand emotions better than adults do, Amira says, cleaning paint from her fingers with deliberate care. We just help them find words for what they already know. That evening, after Levi is in bed, going willingly for the first time in weeks, excited to show Mrs. Henderson his painting, Jareth finds himself lingering in the kitchen while Amira packs up her supplies. He should go to his study, return the dozens of calls he's ignored, prepare for tomorrow's meetings. Instead, he watches her careful movements, The way she treats each paintbrush like it matters, cleaning them thoroughly before placing them back in their designated spots. "Can I ask you something?" he says, his voice careful, uncertain. "Of course. Why do you do this? Work with traumatized children, I mean. It can't be easy." Amira considers the question while cleaning a brush that's been worn down to half its original size, clearly a favorite tool that's seen years of service. "Because healing is possible," she says finally. "Not forgetting, that's not the goal. But learning to carry grief alongside joy, loss alongside love. Children are naturally resilient. They just need someone to believe in that resilience with them. And adults?" She looks at him directly, and for a moment, Jareth feels like she can see straight through to his soul. Adults have learned to build walls around their resilience. Sometimes those walls become prisons. Jareth feels exposed under her gaze, like she can see the walls he's built around his own heart, the way he's locked himself away from anything that might hurt him again. "Levi seems better. When you're here." "He's been waiting for permission to heal," Amira says, drying her hands on a towel that probably costs more than most people's monthly rent. "Sometimes we need someone from outside our pain to remind us that healing doesn't mean betraying our love." "His mother," Jareth starts, then stops, unsure how to continue, unsure why he wants to tell this stranger about the woman who defined his understanding of love. "Tell me about her." And to his own surprise, Jareth does. He tells this relative stranger about Sarah's laugh, about how she never let him win at board games, because she said victory without effort wasn't really victory at all. He talks about the way she could make a grilled cheese sandwich feel like a gourmet meal just by cutting it into triangles and serving it with a smile. He describes how she hummed while doing laundry, how she left little notes in his briefcase, how she could fall asleep anywhere when she was truly happy. He talks for an hour, and Amira listens like every word matters, like she's collecting these memories to build a complete picture of the woman who shaped this family. She doesn't interrupt or offer platitudes or try to fix anything. She just listens with the kind of attention that makes speaking feel like a gift rather than a burden. "She sounds like she was loved completely," Amira says when he finishes, and there's something in her voice that suggests she understands the rarity of that kind of love. "I failed her," Jareth admits, the words coming out before he can stop them. "I was working late the night she died. She was coming to the office to surprise me with dinner, homemade soup because I'd been living on takeout for a week. And if I had just gone home like a normal husband, like someone who understood that family comes first, then you would have been in that car with her," Amira interrupts gently. "And Levi would have lost both parents. It's a perspective Jareth has never considered, and it steals his breath. For 2 years he's been trapped in the logic of his guilt, convinced that his presence could have prevented the accident, could have changed the outcome. But Amira's words open up a different possibility, that his survival wasn't a betrayal but a necessity, that someone had to be left to love Levi through the aftermath. Guilt, Amira continues, her voice soft but firm, is love with nowhere to go. But love doesn't have to become guilt. It can become presence instead. When she leaves that night, gathering her supplies and declining his offer to have his driver take her home, Jareth stands at the window and watches her small figure disappear into the city. For the first time in 2 years, the house doesn't feel quite so empty. For the first time since Sarah died, he can imagine a future that includes laughter. The change in Levi is gradual but undeniable, like watching a flower bloom in time-lapse photography. He starts eating breakfast without being coaxed, actually finishing his pancakes instead of pushing them around his plate until they grew cold. He asks Mrs. Henderson to read him stories, not just any stories, but the ones Sarah used to read with different voices for each character and dramatic gestures that make the housekeeper feel foolish and delighted in equal measure. Most remarkably, he begins to seek out his father's attention. "Daddy, want to see what I painted today?" becomes a daily question that stops Jareth in his tracks every time, forcing him to choose between the urgent demands of his phone and the patient hope in his son's eyes. For the first few days, Jareth struggles with these moments. His instinct is to glance at the painting, offer generic praise, and escape back to the familiar territory of work. But something about Levi's focused attention, The way he explains each brushstroke and color choice gradually pulls Jareth deeper into conversations he didn't know he was capable of having. "This green is for when I feel happy but scared," Levi explains one afternoon, pointing to a swirl of forest green in what appears to be a self-portrait. "Like when I want to try something new but I'm worried it might not work." "That's very smart," Jareth says, and realizes he means it. When did his 6-year-old develop such sophisticated emotional vocabulary? "What made you feel happy but scared?" "Painting with colors," Levi admits. "I was scared Mama might think I was forgetting her if I stopped using black all the time. But Miss Amira says love is like paint. It gets more beautiful when you mix it with other colors." But it's not just Levi who's changing. Jareth finds himself coming home earlier, declining dinner meetings that once seemed essential, actually sitting at the kitchen table instead of eating alone in his study while reviewing documents. He starts to remember what it feels like to be part of something bigger than profit margins, something more meaningful than market dominance. The transformation doesn't go unnoticed. Jennifer, his assistant, begins rescheduling meetings without being asked. His board members express concern about his shifting priorities. Business publications start running articles about his uncharacteristic behavior, speculating about health problems or family crises that might explain why the workaholic CEO of Tech Forward Solutions suddenly seems less interested in world domination. But Jareth finds that he cares less about their opinions and more about the light returning to his son's eyes. Amira comes 3 times a week now, and each visit reveals another layer of the little boy who was hiding beneath the grief. She teaches Levi to identify emotions using colors, helps him create a feelings journal full of paintings that tell the story of his healing in brushstrokes and watercolor washes. "Today, I feel orange worried about the thunderstorm," Levi tells his father one evening, showing him a painting that captures the anxiety of rumbling clouds. "But also green safe because Miss Amira showed me how thunder is just the sky's way of clapping for the rain." Jareth marvels at his son's emotional vocabulary, at the way this woman has given a 6-year-old tools to navigate feelings that Jareth himself can't name. He thinks about his own childhood, raised by a father who believed emotions were weaknesses, to be overcome rather than experiences to be understood. The idea that feelings could be discussed, analyzed, even celebrated, is as foreign to him as speaking a new language. "Can you teach me?" he asks one evening, surprising both himself and Levi. "Teach you what, Daddy?" "About the colors, about feelings." Levi's face lights up with the kind of joy that makes Jareth understand why people have children in the first place. "Yes, Miss Amira says everyone can learn the color language, even grown-ups who forgot how to use it." They spend the next hour at the kitchen table, Levi explaining his emotional color system with the seriousness of a professor and the enthusiasm of a child who finally has someone paying attention to his inner world. Jareth learns that purple is for missing someone in a way that doesn't hurt, that silver is for proud-of-yourself feelings, that mixing red and blue creates the exact shade of love that feels complicated. It's during Levi's 4th week of sessions that everything changes. Jareth comes home to find his father and son in heated conversation with Marcus Webb, his head of security. Apparently, someone at Levi's private school has been asking questions about the new woman in the Malden house. Photos have been taken by freelance paparazzi who make their living selling glimpses of how the wealthy really live. Speculation is brewing in the society pages about Jareth's mysterious companion and what her presence might mean for his carefully controlled public image. "It's probably nothing," Marcus assures him, pulling out his tablet to show Jareth the photos that have started circulating. "But given your public profile and the company's current market position, we wanted you to be aware. The photos are innocent." Enough. Amira walking up the front steps, carrying her art supplies, looking like exactly what she is, a professional caregiver arriving for work. But Jareth knows how these things work, how innocent images can be twisted into scandalous narratives, how the business media feeds on speculation about the personal lives of public figures. "Have they identified her?" he asks. "Not yet, but they will. Social media makes it impossible to stay anonymous for long." That night, after Levi is asleep, going to bed easily now, no longer fighting bedtime like it's a battle he's destined to lose. Jareth calls Amira into his study. The room feels different now, less like a fortress and more like a trap, lined with achievements that suddenly seem hollow compared to his son's laughter. "We need to talk," he says, and she can hear the CEO in his voice, all business and careful control. "About this arrangement. My son has grown unattached to you, but there are complications now. Media attention, questions about your background, your relationship to this family." Amira sits across from his massive desk and doesn't flinch, doesn't seem intimidated by the mahogany and leather and expensive art that surrounds them. "Are you asking me to stop working with Levi? I'm asking you to understand the reality of my position, my son's stability, my family's privacy, my company's reputation. These things matter. They affect thousands of people. And Levi's emotional health, does that matter? Of course it does, but there are other therapists, other professionals who could help him without creating complications, who won't love him the way I do." Amira interrupts quietly. The admission hangs in the air between them. Love. She said it so simply, so honestly, without apology or explanation. Not professional attachment or therapeutic alliance, but love. Raw, honest, uncomplicated love for a little boy who desperately needs it. "You barely know him," Jareth says, though even as the words leave his mouth, he knows they're not true. "I know that he dreams about butterflies every night since we started painting them, and he always paints them in pairs, because he says they're keeping each other company. I know that he saves me the last bite of every snack, because sharing food is how he shows affection. I know that he still sleeps with your wife's scarf because it smells like the mother he's terrified of forgetting, but he's starting to sleep through the night because he's not afraid the dreams will take her away from him." Jareth stares at her, stunned by the depth of her knowledge, the intimacy of her observations. "How do you know all that?" "Because I pay attention. Because children tell you everything if you listen with your whole heart instead of just your ears. Because love means noticing the details that matter to someone else." "And what else has he told you?" Amira hesitates, clearly weighing honesty against diplomacy, then speaks with careful truth. "That he wishes you would stay home for dinner without checking your phone. That he practiced saying, 'I love you, Daddy,' in the mirror because he's afraid you won't say it back. That he thinks the reason you work so much is because spending time with him makes you remember Mama, and remembering makes you sad." Each word is a knife to Jareth's chest, precise and devastating in its accuracy. The image of his son practicing expressions of love, rehearsing vulnerability like it's a performance that might be rejected, breaks something fundamental inside him. I'm not trying to hurt him." "I know," Amira says gently, and her voice carries understanding rather than judgment. "But intent doesn't always match impact. You're grieving too, and grief makes us do strange things, like building walls around our hearts and calling it protection. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, the responsibility of running a company that employs 15,000 people, the decisions that affect. I understand that responsibility to your company feels safer than responsibility to your son," Amira replies with devastating accuracy. "Because companies are predictable. They respond to money and strategy and control. Children require presence and vulnerability and faith in things you can't measure on a spreadsheet." Jareth stands abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooks the garden, where Sarah used to grow vegetables with Levi, where they used to have impromptu picnics when the weather was perfect and work seemed less important than sunshine. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," he says, his voice tight with frustration and fear. "You don't get to come into my house and analyze my choices. You don't know what it's like to lose everything that matters and still have to keep functioning, keep making decisions that affect thousands of lives." "You're right," Amira says, rising from her chair with calm dignity. "I don't. But Levi gets to have an advocate who sees him clearly. And what I see is a little boy who's healing beautifully until his father gets scared and pulls away. I'm not pulling away. You're in your study by 8 every night, even when there's no urgent work. You take calls during dinner, even when they're not emergencies. You haven't once asked to see his feelings journal, even though he's been hoping you would for weeks. You've been present for his body but absent for his heart. The accuracy of her observations silences him completely. How does she know about his evening routines, about the calls that could wait, about hopes he wasn't even aware his son harbored? "I'll finish out this week," Amira continues, moving toward the door with the quiet dignity of someone who knows her own worth. "But then you need to decide what kind of father you want to be, because Levi is going to remember these months for the rest of his life. He's going to remember whether his daddy chose to show up or chose to hide behind his guilt and his work and his fear of feeling anything real." She pauses at the doorway, turning back to face him one more time, and her expression softens slightly. "For what it's worth," she says quietly, "I think you're a better man than you're letting yourself be. I think your wife would want you to stop punishing yourself for surviving, and I think Levi needs his father more than he needs your guilt, or your money or your protection from a world that's going to love him if you let it." After she leaves, Jareth sits alone in his study until nearly midnight, staring at a family photo where all three of them are laughing at some long-forgotten joke, wondering when he became so afraid of love that he'd rather lose it than risk feeling it. Friday morning brings a crisis that threatens to unravel everything Jareth has built over 20 years of ruthless ambition and strategic brilliance. Tech Forward Solutions, his company's biggest competitor, has launched a hostile takeover attempt, backed by Chinese investors with seemingly unlimited resources. His board of directors is in emergency session. His stock price is falling like a stone dropped from a skyscraper. The business media is calling it the corporate battle of the decade, the kind of fight that either makes legends or destroys empires. "You need to be here 24/7 until this is resolved," his lead attorney Richard Cromwell tells him, during a conference call that starts at 6 a.m. and shows no signs of ending before midnight. "Any sign of distraction, any appearance that you're not fully committed to fighting this acquisition, and we lose everything. The shareholders are already nervous about your recent behavioral changes. Everything. $400 million in personal wealth. 15,000 employees whose livelihoods depend on the decisions made in boardrooms they'll never see. 20 years of building an empire from nothing, from a Queens kid who learned to code in the public library because his family couldn't afford a computer. The irony isn't lost on him. He built this company to give his family security, to ensure that Levi would never know the uncertainty that defined Jareth's own childhood. Now that same company demands a sacrifice that could cost him the only family he has left. Meanwhile, 3 floors above the crisis unfolding in his study, Levi sits at the breakfast table, painting a picture that will change everything. It's a family portrait. 3 figures holding hands under a sky full of butterflies. The figures are simple, the way children draw people, but the love in each brushstroke is unmistakable. When Mrs. Henderson sees the painting, her breath catches in her throat. Levi has painted himself in the middle, his father on one side, and Amira on the other. All 3 figures are smiling. All 3 are connected by carefully drawn hands and hearts floating above their heads like thought bubbles made visible. "Who's this?" Mrs. Henderson asks, though she already knows, pointing to Amira's figure, with fingers that tremble slightly. "That's Miss Amira," Levi says matter-of-factly, as if the answer should be obvious. She's like family now." The words hit Mrs. Henderson like a physical blow, because she knows what she knows about the conversation in Jareth's study, about the decision that's already been made, about the goodbye that's coming whether Levi understands it or not. "Family," Levi repeats, testing the word like he's tasting something sweet after a long fast. Miss Amira says family isn't just people who look like you. It's people who see you and stay anyway. Amira arrives for what everyone knows is her last day, though no one has told Levi yet. The adults have made the calculation that childhood ends soon enough on its own. Why accelerate the process with unnecessary cruelty? She brings special paints, the kind that shimmer when they dry, that catch light like captured starlight, and suggests they create a memory garden to celebrate all the beautiful moments Levi can remember. They work together for 3 hours, in the sunroom, and Levi chatters constantly, unaware that this is goodbye, unaware that the adults in his life have decided his healing must be sacrificed to protect his father's reputation. He tells her about the dream he had where his mama visited him and told him it was okay to be happy, that loving new people doesn't mean forgetting old people. He shows her how he's learned to take deep breaths when he feels overwhelmed, demonstrating the technique she taught him with the seriousness of someone sharing life-saving knowledge. He asks if she can teach him to make the special soup she brought last week for his grandfather, the one that made the old man cry because it tasted exactly like something his own mother used to make. "Miss Amira," Levi says as they clean up their supplies, his voice carrying the careful hope of someone who's learned not to expect too much. "Are you going to come back tomorrow?" And Amira, who has never lied to a child in her life, who believes that honesty is the foundation of trust, and trust is the foundation of healing, struggles to find words that are both truthful and gentle. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. Things are complicated right now." "Because of Daddy's work?" The question catches her off guard with its devastating accuracy. How does a 6-year-old understand the adult world so clearly? How has he learned to connect his father's stress with his own abandonment? "He gets sad when he works too much," Levi explains, with the devastating clarity that only children possess. "And when he's sad, he can't see the happy things anymore, like me painting or Grandpa getting stronger, or how you make everything better just by being here." Amira kneels to his eye level, her heart breaking for this little boy who has learned to understand adult emotions better than most adults understand themselves. "Your daddy loves you very much. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices, and sometimes those choices don't feel fair. Will you still love me if you can't come back?" The question undoes her completely. Amira pulls Levi into her arms and holds him like she's trying to memorize the weight of him, the way he smells like apple juice and hope, and the lavender soap Mrs. Henderson uses on his hair. "Love doesn't disappear just because people can't be together," she whispers into his hair, and her voice breaks slightly on the words. "Love lives in here." She places her hand over his heart, and here, she touches his forehead. "And it stays forever, even when people have to be apart." "Like with Mama?" "Just like with Mama." It's 2:30 p.m. when the moment arrives that will define everything that comes after. Jareth, responding to increasingly frantic calls from his legal team, rushes upstairs to grab documents from his home office. He's on the phone with his chief financial officer, discussing liquidation strategies and asset protection, when he hears something that stops him dead in his tracks. Levi is having a nightmare. Not the screaming, thrashing kind that has become routine, but something worse. The quiet kind where he whimpers in his sleep like a wounded animal. Amira is with him, sitting on the edge of his bed, stroking his hair and singing the same Jamaican lullaby she hummed on that first day. "Shh, baby," she whispers, her voice carrying all the love that Levi has been starving for. "You're safe, you're loved. And love doesn't disappear, it just changes shape." Levi stirs, opens his eyes, and looks at her with the kind of trust that breaks hearts and builds them simultaneously. "Miss Amira, I dreamed you went away and never came back. I'm here now," she says, and Jareth can hear the careful honesty in her voice, the way she doesn't promise what she can't guarantee. "I love you," Levi whispers, the words spoken so quietly they're almost lost in the afternoon light filtering through his bedroom curtains. "I love you too, sweetheart, so much." And then, in a moment that will replay in Jareth's mind for the rest of his life, Levi sits up and wraps his small arms around Amira's neck. "Family?" he whispers into her ear, the words spoken like a prayer, like a promise, like a declaration of belonging that transcends blood and law and social convention. Jareth stands frozen in the doorway, his phone still pressed to his ear, his CFO's voice discussing emergency protocols and damage control fading into meaningless noise. He watches his son, his heartbroken, healing, hopeful son, claim this woman as family with the simple certainty that only children possess. And in that moment, standing in the hallway of his $20 million mansion, listening to his son speak the word that means everything and costs nothing, Jareth Malden realizes that he has been given a choice. He can choose the company he built to give his family everything they needed, or he can choose the family that makes everything else irrelevant. He can choose the success that has defined him for 20 years, or he can choose the love that could redefine him for the next 20. He can choose the safe, predictable world of profit margins and board meetings, or he can choose the messy, beautiful, terrifying world of being a father to a little boy who still believes that healing is possible. The phone in his hand continues to buzz with urgent calls about stock prices and emergency meetings and the empire that might crumble if he doesn't. Devote every waking moment to saving it. But all he can hear is his son whispering family to a woman who showed up when no one else would, who loved when love felt dangerous, who saw a little boy drowning in grief and threw him a lifeline made of watercolors and patience. Jareth ends the call without saying goodbye and steps into his son's room, knowing that everything is about to change, knowing that some choices can't be unmade, knowing that love, real love, requires the kind of courage he's spent 2 years learning to avoid. The world stops, not metaphorically, not poetically, but with the absolute stillness that comes when a man realizes he's standing at the crossroads of his entire life. Jareth Malden, CEO of a $400 million empire, stands in his son's doorway and feels time itself hold its breath. His phone has gone silent in his hand, the urgent voices of lawyers and board members reduced to meaningless static. Through the window, Manhattan continues its endless rush, yellow cabs honking, pedestrians hurrying, the great machine of commerce grinding forward without pause. But inside this room, in this moment, everything has crystallized into perfect, terrifying clarity. Levi sits on his bed, arms wrapped around Amira's neck, his small face buried against her shoulder with the complete trust that only children can give. The word he whispered, family, hangs in the air like a butterfly that has landed between them, beautiful and fragile and absolutely transformative. Family. A word Levi hasn't spoken since his mother died, a word that once meant the three. Of them against the world, bedtime stories and Saturday morning pancakes, and the kind of love that makes everything else feel like noise. A word that Jareth thought had died in a car accident on the FDR Drive, buried beneath guilt and grief and the safer distance of work. But here it is, spoken by his 6-year-old son to a woman who came into their lives carrying nothing but patience and art supplies, and the revolutionary idea that healing is possible. Amira meets Jareth's eyes over Levi's head, and in her gaze he sees everything he's been too afraid to acknowledge. She loves his son, not professionally, not as a job or a therapeutic technique, but with the fierce, protective love of someone who would fight the world to keep this child safe. And more devastating than that, more terrifying and wonderful and impossible to ignore, his son loves her back. Real love, the kind that changes everything, the kind that makes you want to be better than you thought possible. Jareth's phone buzzes again, an emergency alert from his head of security. The hostile takeover has accelerated. Tech-Forward's CEO is giving an interview to CNBC, painting Jareth as a distracted leader who has lost focus, who can't be trusted to guide a major corporation through turbulent times. The board is calling an emergency meeting for 4 p.m. His presence isn't requested, it's demanded. He looks at the screen at the messages flooding in faster than he can read them. 2 years ago, this would have sent him into overdrive. 2 years ago, he would have been on the phone, in the car, racing to the office to wage war against anyone who dared threaten what he'd built. But 2 years ago, he didn't understand what he was really fighting for. 2 years ago, he thought success meant winning at any cost. 2 years ago, he believed that love was a luxury he could afford after he'd secured everything else. Now, watching. His son finds safety in the arms of a woman who showed up when it mattered. Jareth finally understands what Sarah tried to tell him before she died. Family isn't what you're building toward, it's what you're building with. Daddy? Levi's voice is small, uncertain. He's pulled back from Amira and is looking at his father with eyes that have learned to expect disappointment, but still hope for something better. Are you okay? The question breaks something inside Jareth's chest. When did his 6-year-old become the one checking on the adults? When did a little boy who should be worried about monsters under the bed start worrying about his father's emotional state? Jareth starts, then stops. He could lie, could offer the same reassurances he always gives, that everything is fine, that Daddy just has to work, that important people are counting on him. But looking at his son's face, at the trust and love and desperate hope written there, he can't do it anymore. I'm scared, he admits, and the words come out like a confession, like something he's never allowed himself to feel, let alone speak out loud. Levi's eyes widen. In his world, daddies aren't scared. Daddies are strong and sure and capable of fixing anything that breaks. But this daddy, his daddy, is standing in the doorway looking lost and fragile and entirely human. "What are you scared of?" Levi asks, and his voice carries the gentle concern of someone much older than 6. Jareth looks at his son, then at Thamira, then at the phone in his hand that represents everything he thought mattered. "I'm scared of losing you," he says finally. "I'm scared I already have." The admission hangs in the air like a prayer waiting for an answer. Amira watches this conversation with the careful attention of someone who understands that some moments change everything, that some truths once spoken can't be taken back. "You can't lose me, Daddy," Levi says with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "I'm your boy. I'll always be your boy, even when you're at work and even when you're sad and even when you forget to come home for dinner." The forgiveness, in those words, the pure, uncomplicated love that doesn't require earning or deserving, breaks Jareth completely. He sinks to his knees beside the bed, and for the first time in 2 years he lets himself really look at his son. Not quickly, not while distracted by other thoughts, but with the complete attention that love deserves. Levi has grown. His face has lost some of its baby roundness. His eyes hold depths that weren't there before the accident. He looks like Sarah around the mouth, like Jareth around the eyes, like himself in ways that have nothing to do with genetics and everything to do with the spirit that makes him uniquely, wonderfully, irreplaceably Levi. "I miss Mama too," Levi says quietly, reaching out to touch his father's face with paint-stained fingers. "But I miss you when you're here, but not really here. Like your body came home, but your heart stayed at work." The observation is so accurate, it steals Jareth's breath. This little boy has been watching, understanding, forgiveness his father's absence, while grieving it at the same time. "I don't know how to do this without her," Jareth whispers, and it's the first completely honest thing he's said in 2 years. "Miss Amira says nobody knows how to do love perfectly," Levi replies, unconsciously quoting the woman who has become his guide through the landscape of loss and healing. "She says the trying is what matters, the showing up and the staying and the not giving up even when it's hard." Jareth looks at Amira, who has remained silent through this exchange, giving father and son space to find their way back to each other. Her eyes are bright with unshed tears, but her expression is peaceful, like someone watching a prayer being answered. "You taught him that?" he asks. "I learned it from him," Amira says softly. "Children understand love better than adults do. We complicate it with conditions and expectations and fear. They just love completely, without reservation, without protection." Jareth's phone rings. Richard Cromwell, his attorney, probably calling with updates about the board meeting, about emergency strategies, about the empire that could crumble if he doesn't drop everything and fight for it. He looks at the screen, then at his son, then at the woman who has given them both the gift of hope. The phone stops ringing, then immediately starts again. "Daddy," Levi says, his voice carrying a wisdom that shouldn't exist in someone so young. "What's more important, your work or your family?" It should be a simple question. For 2 years, Jareth would have said they're the same thing, that work provides for family, that success protects the people you love, that building an empire is how you build security. But sitting on his son's bed, looking into eyes that have seen too much loss for someone so small, he realizes the question isn't simple at all. It's the most important question anyone ever gets asked. It's the question that determines not just what you do with your life, but who you become while you're living it. The phone rings again. Emergency meeting, hostile takeover, crisis that demands immediate attention. Jareth looks at his son, at the trust and hope and infinite love shining in his eyes. He looks at Amira, who showed up when no one else would, who loved when love felt dangerous, who saw a broken family and decided to help them remember what wholeness feels like. He looks at his phone one more time, then does something he's never done in 20 years of building an empire. He turns it off. The silence that follows the phone powering down is profound, almost sacred. In a world where connectivity means survival, Where being unreachable is professional suicide, Jareth Malden has just committed the ultimate act of rebellion. He has chosen presence over productivity, relationship over revenue, love over legacy. "Are you going to get in trouble?" Levi asks, his voice small with concern for his father's well-being. It's a question that reveals how much this 6-year-old understands about the adult world, how aware he is of the sacrifices his father has convinced himself he's making for the family's benefit. "Maybe," Jareth says honestly, "because this little boy deserves truth, not more comforting lies." "Probably. But some things are more important than not getting in trouble." "Like what?" Jareth reaches out and takes his son's small hand in his own, amazed by how perfectly it fits, how he's forgotten the simple pleasure of this connection. "Like being here with you, like making sure you know that you matter more than any business deal or board meeting or amount of money." Levi's smile could power the entire city. It's pure joy, uncomplicated by adult anxieties about consequences and complications. It's the smile of a little boy who has just learned that he is in fact his father's first priority. "Miss Amira," Levi says, turning to include her in this moment. "Daddy chose family." "I can see that," Amira says, and her voice carries a depth of emotion that speaks to her own understanding of what this choice costs, what it means, what it makes possible. Jareth looks at her, really looks at her for the first time since she entered their lives. He sees her strength, the way she carries herself with quiet dignity. He sees her gentleness, the natural ease with which she navigates his son's emotional landscape. He sees her courage, the way she's willing to love someone else's child with the fierce protection of a mother. "Thank you," he says, and the words carry weight they've never held before. Not the polite gratitude of employer to employee, but the profound appreciation of one human being for another, who saved what mattered most. For what? For seeing him when I was too afraid to look, for loving him when I forgot how, for showing up when everyone else, when I, let him down. Amira shakes her head slightly. "You didn't let him down, you were grieving too. Adults just don't always know how to grieve and parent at the same time. But you do." "I've had practice with loss," she says simply. "And I've learned that love doesn't disappear when someone dies. It just needs new places to live." Outside, Manhattan continues its relentless pace. Inside this room, time moves differently, marked not by deadlines and meetings, but by heartbeats and breath and the gradual rebuilding of trust between a father and son who nearly lost each other to grief. Jareth's phone, though silent, seems to pulse with the urgency of unanswered calls. He knows what's happening at his company: emergency meetings without their CEO, board members questioning his judgment, competitors sensing weakness and moving in for the kill. He knows this decision will cost him, possibly everything he's spent, 20 years building. But looking at his son's face, seeing hope replace the careful resignation that has lived in Levi's eyes for 2 years, Jareth realizes he's not losing anything. He's finally winning what matters. "What happens now?" Levi asks with the practical curiosity of childhood. "Now," Jareth says, settling more comfortably on the bed, "we figure out how to be a family again. All of us." He looks at Amira as he says, this including her in the definition of family, with an intentionality that surprises them both. It's not a romantic declaration or a practical arrangement. It's something deeper, more fundamental. It's the recognition that love creates family, not blood or law or social convention. "All of us," Levi repeats, testing the words like they're a new language he's learning to speak. "Like a real family, with dinner together and bedtime stories. And everything." "Everything," Jareth confirms, and as he says it, he can see the life they might build together. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real, honest, present, built on the foundation of showing up for each other, especially when it's difficult. Amira watches this conversation with wonder, seeing a transformation that seemed impossible just hours ago. A father remembering how to be present, a son rediscovering trust, a family learning to breathe again. "I should go," she says quietly, not because she wants to leave, but because she recognizes that some moments belong to fathers and sons, that some healing happens in private. "No," Levi says quickly, panic flickering in his eyes. "Don't go, please." "Don't go. I'll come back," Amira promises. "I'll always come back." "When?" Amira looks at Jareth, seeking permission, asking a question that goes deeper than scheduling. Tomorrow, Jareth says without hesitation, and the day after that, and every day that you're willing to be part of this family. The word family settles over them like a blessing, like a promise, like the beginning of something that has been broken too long and is finally ready to heal. Outside, New York City continues its eternal rush. 8 million people chasing 8 million dreams. Business deals rise and fall. Empires are built and destroyed. Success is measured in numbers that change by the minute. But inside this room, 3 people sit quietly, together, and for the first time in 2 years, the Malden house feels like a home. Morning comes with a different quality of light, as if the sun itself understands that something fundamental has shifted in the Malden household. For the first time in 2 years, Jareth wakes up not to the urgent buzz of his phone, but to the sound of laughter drifting up from the kitchen, his son's giggle mixing with Mrs. Henderson's delighted chuckle, and a voice he's learning to cherish. Amira's warm, musical laugh. He lies in bed for a moment, listening to the symphony of a house that remembers how to be happy. The sounds are simple: the clink of dishes, the scrape of a chair being pulled out, the gentle teasing that happens when people feel safe enough to be silly together. But to Jareth, who has lived in silence for 2 years, it sounds like a miracle. Yesterday changed everything. After Amira left with promises to return this morning, Jareth spent the evening doing something he hasn't done since Sarah died. He sat with his son, not working, not distracted, not planning his escape to more important matters, just sitting, talking, learning who Levi has become during the months when grief made paying attention feel impossible. They talked about colors and feelings, about dreams where Mama visits and isn't sad anymore, about the butterflies that Levi paints because they remind him that beautiful things can fly even when they seem fragile. They talked about the fear that loving new people means forgetting old people, and how Amira taught him that hearts don't work like storage units. They expand to hold more love. They don't require you to discard what came before. She makes the house feel happy again, Levi had said as they looked through his art journal together, page after page documenting his emotional journey from darkness toward light. Like when Mama was here, but different. Like the house can hold more than one kind of love. Now walking downstairs in his pajamas for the first time in years, usually he's showered, dressed, and halfway to the office before anyone else is awake, Jareth follows the sounds of his family toward what he hopes is the beginning of a completely different kind of life. He finds them in the kitchen, and the scene that greets him is so perfectly domestic it takes his breath away. Levi sits at the counter on a stool that's too tall for him, his feet swinging freely, carefully measuring flour into a bowl while Amira guides his hands. Mrs. Henderson stands nearby, offering encouragement and wiping up spills with the patient smile of someone who understands that cooking with children is more about connection than cuisine. "We're making pancakes," Levi announces when he sees his father, his face bright with flour and excitement. "Not the regular kind, special ones. Miss Amira knows how to make them fluffy like clouds." "Clouds?" Jareth asks, accepting the coffee. Mrs. Henderson presses into his hands, black 2 sugars exactly the way he likes it, but somehow tasting better in this moment of shared morning chaos. "The secret," Amira explains, her eyes twinkling with the kind of mischief that makes ordinary moments feel magical, "is adding a little bit of magic to the batter." "Magic isn't real," Levi says with 6-year-old skepticism, but he's smiling as he says it, clearly hoping to be proven wrong. "Oh, but it is," Amira replies, pulling a small bottle from her bag with theatrical flourish. "Vanilla extract. 1 drop, and ordinary pancakes become extraordinary." She lets Levi add the vanilla, and as the scent fills the kitchen, something in Jareth's chest loosens. This is what he's been missing, not just time with his son, but the texture of family life. The small rituals that turn a house into a home, a collection of individuals into a unit that cares for each other. "Daddy, you have to stay for breakfast," Levi says, and there's still a note of uncertainty in his voice, as if he's not quite sure this new version of his father will stick around. "I'm not going anywhere," Jareth says, and means it in ways that go far beyond this single morning. His phone, plugged in across the room, buzzes insistently. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, emergency alerts from his board of directors and legal team. The business world is burning down around him, and for the first time in his adult life, he finds he doesn't care. Levi notices the buzzing and his shoulders tense slightly, a conditioned response to the sound that has interrupted so many moments between them. "It's okay," Jareth says quickly, walking to the phone and doing something that would have been unthinkable 24 hours ago. He turns it off completely, then puts it in a drawer. No calls during family time. The relief on Levi's face is immediate and heartbreaking. How many times has this little boy watched his father choose work over presents? How many moments have been sacrificed to the demands of a company that suddenly feels much less important than the people sitting in this kitchen? Family time, Levi repeats, testing the phrase like it's a new song he's learning to sing. I like family time. They eat breakfast together at the kitchen table, not the formal dining room where meals have been solitary and silent, but the smaller, warmer space where Mrs. Henderson usually eats alone. The pancakes are indeed fluffy like clouds, and Levi insists on cutting his father's food into bite-sized pieces, a reversal of roles that makes everyone laugh. What do people do during family time? Levi asks, syrup on his chin and hope in his eyes. Whatever they want, Amira says. Some families go for walks. Some families play games. Some families just talk and tell stories and enjoy being together, can eat tea. We do all of those things? We can do whatever makes us happy, Jareth says, and realizes he can't remember the last time he asked himself what would make him happy, rather than what would make him successful. After breakfast, they migrate to the living room, a formal space that has been more like a museum than a place where people actually live. Levi immediately sets up an art station on the expensive coffee table, spreading out papers and paints, with the confidence of someone who no longer feels like he's trespassing in his own home. I want to paint our family, he announces. The new one, with everyone in it. He works with intense concentration, his tongue sticking out slightly in the way children do when they're completely absorbed in creation. Jareth watches his son's careful brushstrokes, amazed by the improvement in his fine motor skills, by the confidence with which he mixes colors and makes artistic decisions. Miss Amira taught me that families come in all different shapes, Levi explains as he paints. Some are big and some are small, and some have people who aren't related but love each other anyway. Amira catches Jareth's eye over Levi's head, and they share a moment of silent communication, the recognition that this child has processed concepts that many adults struggle to understand. Tell me about the shapes, Jareth says, settling on the floor beside his son, getting paint on his expensive pajamas and not caring in the slightest. Well, Levi says seriously, there's triangle families, which is like me and you and Mama before the accident, and there's circle families, which go round and include everybody who loves each other, and there's star families, which have points that reach out to touch other people and bring them in. What kind of family are we? Jareth asks. Levi considers this question with the gravity of a philosopher. I think we're becoming a circle family. See? He shows his father the painting, 3 figures holding hands in a circle, with hearts floating above their heads and butterflies dancing around them. The circle keeps everyone safe inside, but it's also open, so new love can come in. The sophistication of his emotional reasoning takes Jareth's breath away. When did his son become so wise? How much has he missed during these months of emotional absence? That's beautiful, Amira says, and her voice carries the wonder of someone who spends her life helping children heal, but still marvels at their capacity for wisdom. Can we hang it on the refrigerator? Levi asks. Mama used to hang all my pictures on the refrigerator, but after she died, nobody wanted to look at my art anymore. The casual way he mentions this, the matter-of-fact acknowledgement that his creativity became unwelcome after his mother's death, hits Jareth like a physical blow. How many of his son's attempts at connection has he unconsciously rejected? How many small offerings of love has he failed to receive? We'll hang it in the most important place in the house, Jareth promises, where everyone can see it every day. The refrigerator. The refrigerator. Levi beams, and the simple joy on his face makes Jareth understand that happiness isn't complicated. It's just been buried under layers of adult anxiety and perfectionism and fear. They spend the morning playing games that Jareth hasn't thought about in years. Hide and seek through rooms that suddenly feel less like a showcase and more like a playground. Building blanket forts in the living room, using furniture that costs more than most people's cars. Reading stories with different voices for each character, making Levi dissolve into giggles when his serious father attempts to sound like a cartoon mouse. At one point, while Levi is showing Amira his extensive collection of toy cars, each one with its own name and personality, Jareth's father appears in his wheelchair, drawn by the sounds of laughter that have been absent from this house for too long. "Well," the old man says, his eyes bright with tears he's not ashamed to shed, "this is more like it." "Grandpa!" Levi runs to him, careful not to jostle the wheelchair, but eager to share his excitement. "We're having family time, and Miss Amira is part of the family now," and Daddy turned off his phone. "Did he now?" Old Mr. Malden looks at his son with something between pride and amazement. "That's quite something." "It's overdue," Jareth admits, kneeling beside his father's chair. "I'm sorry it took me so long to remember what matters." The old man reaches out with a shaking hand and touches his son's face, the same gesture Levi made yesterday. A bridge across generations of men who are finally learning to express love without shame. "Your mother would be proud," he whispers. "She always said success without family is just expensive loneliness. Sarah used to say the same thing. Smart women, both of them. Maybe it's time we started listening." The peaceful bubble of family time bursts at exactly 11:47 a.m. when the doorbell rings, with the insistence of someone who will not be ignored. Through the frosted glass of the front door, Jareth can see the silhouette of Richard Cromwell, his lead attorney, accompanied by what appears to be half his legal team. "Mr. Malden," Richard's voice carries through the door with barely contained frustration. "We need to talk, now." Levi looks up from his art project, concern clouding his face. "Who's that, Daddy?" "Work people," Jareth says simply, and the phrase feels strange in his mouth, as if work has become something foreign, something separate from his real life. "Are they here to take you away?" The question pierces Jareth's heart. In Levi's experience, work people always take Daddy away. They arrive with urgent demands and leave with his father in tow, returning him hours or days later, more distant and preoccupied than before. "No," Jareth says firmly, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "They're not taking me anywhere." He opens the door to find Richard pacing on the front steps, his expensive suit wrinkled, and his hair mussed in a way that suggests he's been running his hands through it all morning. Behind him stand two junior associates, both looking uncomfortable and slightly terrified. "Jareth, thank God," Richard rushes forward. "We've been trying to reach you all morning. The hostile takeover, it's accelerated. Tech Forward is calling an emergency shareholder meeting for this afternoon. If you don't appear and make a statement, the board is going to assume you're incapacitated and move forward with succession protocols." "Good morning, Richard," Jareth says calmly. "Would you like some coffee?" Richard stares at him as if he's spoken in a foreign language. "Coffee? Jareth, did you hear what I just said? Your entire company is about to be stolen out from under you, and you're offering me coffee." "I heard you," Jareth replies, stepping aside to let the legal team into the foyer. "But it's family time right now. Work comes after family time." "Family time?" Richard's voice rises an octave. "Jareth, we're talking about $400 million. We're talking about your life's work. We're talking about—" He stops mid-sentence as Levi appears in the doorway, paint on his hands and curiosity in his eyes. The little boy studies the three men in expensive suits with the frank assessment of children who haven't yet learned to be intimidated by authority. "Are you here to help Daddy be happy?" Levi asks Richard directly. "I'm here to help your father save his company," Richard replies, clearly unsure how to talk to a 6-year-old. "Oh," Levi says, processing this information. "But companies don't make people happy. Family makes people happy. Miss Amira taught me that." Richard looks at Jareth with growing alarm. "Who is Miss Amira?" "A friend," Jareth says simply, though The word feels inadequate for what Amira has become to them. A friend who's giving your son advice about business priorities. A friend who's teaching my son about life priorities, Jareth corrects. There's a difference. Amira appears then, drawn by the voices and the obvious tension. She takes in the scene quickly. The anxious lawyers, Jareth's calm demeanor, Levi's protective stance near his father, and moves to stand beside Levi, a quiet presence that somehow changes the entire dynamic of the room. "Gentlemen," she says with polite warmth, "I'm Amira. You're welcome to join us for family time, but we do ask that phones stay off and voices stay gentle around Levi." Richard stares at her as if she's an alien species. Family time? It's when families spend time together without work interruptions, Levi explains helpfully. We paint and play games and talk about feelings. Want to try it? This isn't... Richard struggles to form coherent sentences. "Jareth, can we speak privately?" "Anything you need to say can be said in front of my family," Jareth replies. And the word family includes Amira without hesitation. "Your family?" Richard's eyes dart between Jareth, Levi, and Amira, trying to decode this new configuration. "Jareth, what's going on here? Yesterday you were a focused businessman. Today you're... I don't know what you are." "I'm a father," Jareth says simply. "I'm a son. I'm a man who's finally figured out what success actually means. Success means saving your company. Success means showing up for the people who love you." Richard throws his hands up in exasperation. "This is insane. You're having some kind of breakdown. The board is going to demand a psychological evaluation. The shareholders will sue for breach of fiduciary duty. Your reputation will be destroyed." "Reputation with whom?" Jareth asks. "With people who measure my worth by my stock price? With investors who don't know my son's name? With business partners who would replace me tomorrow if my quarterly reports disappointed them? With the business community, with your peers, with everyone who matters." Levi tugs on his father's sleeve. "Daddy, is that man saying we don't matter?" Thwasa. Question hangs in the air like a challenge that demands an answer. Richard looks down at the little boy, then at Jareth, clearly struggling with the implications of what he's just said. "Of course you matter," Richard says awkwardly. "But your father has responsibilities." "To us," Levi interrupts with 6-year-old logic. "Family is the most important responsibility. Miss Amira says so, and Grandpa says so, and Daddy says so too now." "Since when does a 6-year-old set business priorities?" Richard asks desperately. "Since I remembered that business exists." "To serve life, not the other way around," Jareth replies. "Richard, I appreciate everything you've done for me over the years, but I'm not going to the meeting this afternoon. I'm not fighting the takeover. I'm not choosing the company over my family ever again." "You're resigning?" "I'm choosing what matters." Richard stares at him for a long moment, then shakes his head slowly. "I don't understand you anymore." "I don't understand me anymore either," Jareth admits. "But for the first time in 2 years, I like who I'm becoming." After the lawyers leave, shaking their heads and muttering about psychological evaluations and breach of contract, the house settles back into its new rhythm of peace. But something has shifted. The outside world has intruded on their bubble. A family time, and everyone knows it won't be the last time. "Are you scared, Daddy?" Levi asks as they clean up the breakfast dishes together. "A little," Jareth admits. "Change is scary, even when it's good change." "But you're not going to change your mind about family time being more important?" "Never," Jareth promises. "You are the most important thing in my life. Nothing will ever change that." "Good," Levi says with satisfaction, "because I love you and I want you to stay." And in that moment, standing in his kitchen with dish soap on his hands and his son by his side, Jareth understands that he's already won everything that matters. The afternoon brings a different kind of magic, the magic of ordinary moments that become extraordinary when experienced with complete presence. They have lunch on the living room floor, a picnic indoors, because Levi declares that eating in the dining room is too fancy for family time. They build a fort out of couch cushions and tell stories about brave knights and kind dragons and families that choose each other instead of just being stuck with each other. During Levi's quiet time, not a nap, because 7-year-olds don't nap, but a rest period where he looks at books and talks to his stuffed animals, Jareth and Amira find themselves alone together for the first time since this transformation began. They sit on the back patio, watching the garden that Sarah once tended, now overgrown but still beautiful in its wildness. The silence between them is comfortable, the kind that exists between people who have shared something profound and don't need words to acknowledge it. "Are you really ready for this?" Amira asks eventually, her voice gentle but serious. "For the consequences of choosing family over business?" "I don't know," Jareth answers honestly. "I've never done anything like this before. I've never chosen love over fear, presence over productivity. I've never trusted that being enough would be enough. And now? Now I'm terrified and exhilarated and more certain than I've ever been about anything. Does that make sense?" Amira smiles. "Perfect sense. That's what love feels like when you stop trying to control it. Is that what this is? Love?" The question hangs between them, loaded with possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. They're talking about more than just his relationship with Levi, more than just his choice to prioritize family. They're talking about the connection that has grown between them, the way she has become essential to their healing, the way he has begun to imagine a future that includes her, not just as Levi's caregiver, but as something more. "It's love," Amira says simply. "All of it. Your love for Levi, his love for you, the love that's growing between all of us. Love doesn't have to be complicated or dramatic or perfect. It just has to be chosen every day, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. Especially then." They sit in comfortable silence for a while, watching birds flutter around the overgrown rose bushes that Sarah planted years ago. The roses are blooming despite neglect, or perhaps because of it, wild, and abundant and more beautiful than they ever were when carefully tended. "Amira," Jareth says eventually, "I need you to know something." "What?" "I can't pay you anymore. Not like I have been. If I walk away from the company, if I lose my position and my salary, our life is going to look very different. Smaller. Less secure. Do you think I'm here for the money?" she asks, and there's amusement in her voice rather than offense. "No, I don't know why you're here actually, why you stayed, why you keep choosing us when we're such a mess." Amira turns to face him fully, her dark eyes serious but warm. "I'm here because Levi needs me. Because you need me. Because I need you both in ways I didn't even realize until I found you. I'm here because love creates family, and somewhere along the way, you became mine." The words hit him like a revelation. Family. Not the family you're born into, but the family you choose, the family you build through presence and commitment and the daily decision to show up for each other. "What happens now?" he asks. "Now we figure it out together. We find a smaller place to live, simpler ways to be happy, work that serves life instead of consuming it. We learn how to be a family that's based on love instead of money. And you'll stay, even when things get difficult, even when the money runs out and the house gets smaller and life becomes more complicated?" "Jareth," Amira says gently, reaching for his hand. "Love doesn't need a mansion to survive. Love just needs people who are willing to choose it every day, no matter what." Through the sliding glass door, they can hear Levi talking to his stuffed animals, creating elaborate stories about families of toys who go on adventures together. His voice is animated, joyful, completely different from the silent child who once colored everything black. "He's going to be okay," Amira says, following Jareth's gaze toward the house. "How do you know?" "Because he has something he didn't have before, the certainty that he's loved, completely and unconditionally. Children can survive almost anything if they know they're loved. And now he knows, because of you, because of all of us, because we chose to be a family, because love won." As if summoned by their conversation, Levi appears at the sliding door, hair mussed from his quiet time, and a book clutched in his hands. "Can we read together?" he asks. "All three of us?" And they do. They pile onto the living room couch, Levi in the middle, Jareth on one side, Amira on the other, and read stories about families who overcome obstacles through love and courage and the unwavering belief that being together is the greatest adventure of all. As the afternoon light fades into evening, as the house settles into the comfortable rhythm of people who belong together, Jareth looks around at his family, chosen, imperfect, and absolutely precious, and understands that he hasn't lost anything at all. He's finally found everything he never knew he was looking for. 1 year later, the Malden family lives in a house that costs less than Jareth used to spend on his monthly car payment, and they have never been richer. The small colonial in Westchester is nothing like the Manhattan mansion they left behind. The rooms are cozy rather than grand, the ceilings human-scaled rather than cathedral-high, the address ordinary rather than prestigious. There's no marble in the foyer, no chandeliers imported from France, no Persian rugs worth more than most people's annual salaries. But what this house has that the mansion never did is the sound of laughter echoing through every room, the comfort of spaces designed for living rather than impressing, the warmth that comes when a house is filled with people who choose to be there rather than people who are paid to be there. Levi's bedroom overlooks a garden where he and Amira grow vegetables together, their hands dirty with rich soil and their conversations full of wonder about how tiny seeds become food for the table. His walls are covered with artwork, not expensive, paintings chosen by interior designers, but his own creations, bright watercolors that tell the story of a little boy learning to be happy again. The refrigerator downstairs groans under the weight of his artistic output, every door and side panel covered with pictures of butterflies and families and houses with hearts floating above them like thought bubbles made visible. "Daddy," Levi says one Saturday morning, kneeling on his window seat and watching his father tend to the tomato plants below. "Do you miss being rich?" It's a question Levi has asked in various forms over the past months, as if he's trying to understand whether his father regrets the choice that changed everything. Each time Jareth's answer becomes clearer, more certain, more complete. "We are rich," Jareth says, joining his son at the window, settling beside him on the narrow sill that would have been considered inadequate in their old life, but feels perfect now. "We're just rich in different ways." "What kind of ways?" "Well," Jareth says, wrapping an arm around his son's shoulders, "we're rich in time, rich in laughter, rich in hugs and bedtime stories and Saturday morning pancakes, rich in the kind of love that doesn't require anything except showing up for each other. But we don't have a swimming pool anymore, or a movie theater, or people who bring us food whenever we want it." "No," Jareth agrees. "But we have something better." "What?" "We have each other. Really have each other. Not just living in the same house, but being present in the same life. And you know what? I'd rather have one Saturday morning with you than 100 swimming pools." Levi considers this with the seriousness he brings to all important questions. "I think I like this kind of rich better too." "Me too." The transformation hasn't been easy. Learning to live on a teacher's salary, Jareth now works at the local elementary school, teaching computer programming to children who remind him daily why presence matters more than profit, required adjustments that went far beyond financial. They shop at grocery stores instead of having gourmet meals delivered. They drive a used Honda instead of being chauffeured in luxury cars. They vacation at state parks instead of European resorts. But every adjustment brought unexpected gifts. Grocery shopping became an adventure when Levi was allowed to help choose their food, reading labels and comparing prices like a tiny economist. The Honda became a space for singing along to music and playing road trip games during their weekend explorations of hiking trails and small towns. State park vacations became opportunities to sleep under stars and tell stories around campfires, and discover that the best entertainment comes from each other's company. Mrs. Henderson chose to come with them, taking a significant pay cut to work for a family that could no longer afford a full-time housekeeper, but couldn't imagine life without the woman who had become their anchor through grief and healing. She works part-time now, spending her other hours volunteering at a literacy program for immigrants, finally free to pursue the community service that had always called to her heart. "You know," she told Jareth one evening as they folded laundry, together, a task she once did alone but now shares with the family as a time for conversation and connection. "I've worked for wealthy families for 30 years, and this is the first time I've felt like part of a family instead of just part of the staff." Old Mr. Malden made the transition too, selling his own Fifth Avenue apartment and moving into a small cottage just 2 blocks from his son's new home. The move forced him to confront his own mortality and priorities, choosing proximity to family over the prestige of his exclusive address. His wheelchair fits perfectly in the modest spaces of their new life, and his evening routine now includes dinner with 3 generations around a kitchen table that seats exactly 4 people. "I should have done this decades ago," he tells Jareth. One evening as they wash dishes together, a mundane task that has become sacred in its ordinariness, "Should have chosen love over luxury, presence over prestige. Your mother tried to tell me, but I was too stubborn to listen." "We both did the best we knew how to do," Jareth replies, and means it. "We just didn't know there were other ways to live until life forced us to learn them." "Your mother would be proud. She always said the best inheritance a father can give his children is the model of how to love well." I'm finally learning. The biggest change, the most transformative adjustment, is Amira's permanent place in their family. They married 6 months ago in the small church where Mrs. Henderson has worshipped for 20 years, with a ceremony that cost less than one of Jareth's former business dinners, but felt more meaningful than any corporate achievement he'd ever celebrated. Levi walked Amira down the aisle, having insisted that since she was becoming his family, he should be the one to officially bring her to his father. The look of pure joy on his face as he placed Amira's hand in Jareth's was captured in photographs that now line the mantel of their modest fireplace, pictures worth more than any stock portfolio because they document the moment when love officially won. "Miss Amira is now Mama Amira," Levi had announced to anyone who would listen after the ceremony. "Not instead of my first mama, but in addition to her. Because love is like math. It's the only thing that gets bigger when you add to it instead of smaller." Amira's brother Marcus has become Uncle Marcus to a little boy who collects family members like treasures, understanding that love multiplies rather than divides when shared generously. Marcus moved into an accessible apartment 3 blocks away, close enough for daily visits but far enough to maintain his independence. Watching him and Levi together, the young man teaching the little boy about resilience and determination, the child showing the adult that joy is a choice you can make every day, has become one of Jareth's greatest pleasures. They're teaching each other. Amira observed one afternoon as they watched Marcus help Levi build a wheelchair-accessible treehouse in their backyard. Marcus is learning that his limitations don't define his worth, and Levi is learning that different doesn't mean less than. "What are we learning?" Jareth asked. "That family isn't about perfection. It's about acceptance. It's about showing up for each other, especially when things get difficult." 2 years after the choice that changed everything, the Malden family gathers in their small backyard for Levi's 8th birthday party. It's nothing like the elaborate celebrations they used to host. No hired entertainers, no designer decorations, no guest list, carefully curated for business networking opportunities. Instead, there are 8 children from Levi's class, Mrs. Henderson's famous chocolate cake, and games that require nothing more than imagination and the willingness to be silly. Levi blows out his candles and makes a wish that he immediately shares with everyone present. "I wished for this day to last forever, because every day with my family is the best day ever." The simplicity of his joy, the completeness of his contentment, takes the breath away from every adult who remembers when this little boy lived in darkness, when laughter seemed impossible, when healing felt like a destination too distant to reach. "What makes today so special?" Jareth asks, genuinely curious about his son's perspective on happiness. "Everyone I love is here," Levi says simply, looking around at the circle of people who have chosen to celebrate with him. "And everyone who's here loves me back, and we're all healthy and safe and together. What else could anyone want? Indeed, what else could anyone want?" As the afternoon light begins to fade and the birthday guests are collected by their parents, the family settles into the quiet contentment that marks the end of celebration. Levi sits in the grass, still wearing his party hat askew, carefully opening each gift with the appreciation of someone who understands that presents are expressions of love rather than obligations to be quickly consumed. "Look," he says, holding up a watercolor set from Amira, his 3rd such gift, because he goes through paints like other children go through crayons. New colors. Now I can paint even more beautiful pictures of our family. The refrigerator has indeed become their gallery, covered with Levi's artwork that chronicles his emotional journey from grief toward joy. The latest paintings are explosions of color, families of butterflies dancing in gardens, houses with smoke curling from chimneys and hearts floating in the sky above them, portraits of 4 people holding hands under rainbows that stretch from one side of the paper to the other. "What will you paint first?" Amira asks, settling beside him in the grass, her wedding ring catching the late afternoon light. It's a simple band. They couldn't afford diamonds and didn't want them. But Levi insists it's the most beautiful ring in the world because it means Mama Amira is staying forever. Our family, Levi says without hesitation. All of us together in our real house. Not the big fancy one where we used to live, but this one, the one that feels like home. As evening settles over their neighborhood, a place where children ride, bicycles in the street, and neighbors know each other's names, and the pace of life allows for front porch conversations. Jareth and Amira sit on their small deck while Levi plays with his new toys in the living room, his laughter drifting through the open windows like music. "Any regrets?" Amira asks, the question that has become their evening ritual, their way of checking in with each other about the radical life changes they've embraced. About leaving the company, about the money, about walking away from everything I spent 20 years building. Jareth considers the question seriously, because regret is a legitimate concern when someone gives up financial security for emotional authenticity. None, not a single one. Even when the car breaks down and we have to take the bus, even when we can't afford vacation this year, even when your former colleagues look at you like you've lost your mind. Especially then, Jareth says, reaching for her hand with the automatic affection of people who have learned to touch each other like anchors in a world that often feels unmoored. Because every inconvenience, every financial challenge, every moment when life feels difficult is still better than the alternative, which is being rich and successful and miserable, having everything money can buy and nothing that actually matters, providing for my family's financial future while missing their emotional present. Through the window, they can hear Levi talking to his new stuffed elephant, a conversation that involves elaborate backstories and multiple voices, and the kind of imagination that flourishes when children feel safe enough to be themselves. "He's so different now," Amira observes. "So confident, so joyful, so certain that he's loved. We all are. Even you." Jareth turns to look at her, this woman who entered their lives during their darkest season and chose to stay for their brightest days. Her face is gentler now, less guarded, marked by the peace that comes from being exactly where you belong. "Especially me," he says. "I spent 40 years thinking love was something you earned through achievement. I thought if I was successful, enough, wealthy enough, powerful enough, then maybe I'd be worthy of being loved. But you and Levi taught me that love isn't a reward for performance. It's a gift that gets freely given to people who are willing to receive it. And now I know that the greatest success is being loved for who you are, not what you've accomplished. The greatest wealth is having people who choose to stay with you, not because they have to, but because they want to." As if summoned by their conversation about him, Levi appears at the sliding door, hair mussed from playing and a book clutched in his hands. "Can we read together?" he asks. "All 3 of us? Like we always do?" And they do. They pile onto their small couch, Levi in the middle, Jareth on one side, Amira on the other, and read stories about families who overcome obstacles through love and courage and the unwavering belief that being together is the greatest adventure. But tonight, before they open the book, Levi looks around at his parents with serious 8-year-old eyes. "I want to tell you something," he says solemnly. "What's that, sweetheart?" Amira asks. "I remember Mama. I remember her smile and her hugs and how she used to sing to me. And I love her so much it feels like my heart might explode." Jareth and Amira hold their breath, waiting. "But I also love this family. I love how Daddy comes home for dinner every night now. I love how Mama Amira teaches me that feelings are okay to have. I love how Grandpa tells stories, and Uncle Marcus makes me laugh, and Mrs. Henderson lets me help make cookies." He pauses, considering his words carefully. I think maybe love isn't about choosing. Maybe love is about growing. Maybe my heart grew bigger so it could hold all the love I have, for Mama in heaven and for my family here on earth. The wisdom in his words, the emotional sophistication of a child who has learned to hold grief and joy simultaneously, leaves both adults speechless. I think, Levi continues, that Mama would be happy about our family. I think she would like Mama Amira and be glad that Daddy learned how to smile again. I think she would say we're doing love right. And in that moment, sitting on their modest couch in their ordinary house, surrounded by the accumulated treasures of a life built on presence rather than profit, Jareth understands what Sarah would have wanted for them. Not eternal grief, not a monument to loss, but exactly this, a family that chooses love over fear, presence over productivity, connection over control. Family is not who shares your blood, Amira says softly, echoing the message that has become their motto. It's who stands beside you when your soul breaks, and who stays to help you put it back together, and who celebrates with you when your soul learns to sing again, Jareth adds. As the evening light fades into darkness and the house settles into the comfortable rhythm of people who belong together, Levi falls asleep between his parents, the book forgotten on his lap, a smile on his face that speaks of a child who knows, absolutely and without question, that he is loved. Outside, Westchester continues its quiet suburban pace. Inside, three people who found each other in the ruins of grief have built something beautiful from the pieces. A family defined not by blood or law or social convention, but by the daily choice to show up for each other, to love without reservation, to believe that the best inheritance anyone can give or receive is the certainty that they matter. And in the soft glow of the reading lamp, as Jareth and Amira carefully transfer their sleeping son to his bed and then return to sit together in the peaceful silence of their imperfect, perfect life, they understand that they have won everything that truly matters: love, presence. The knowledge that family is something you build, not something you're born into. The knowledge that home isn't a place, it's the people who choose to stay. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that love creates the most beautiful families, please show your support by giving this video a thumbs up. Your like tells us that stories about healing, hope, and the power of chosen family matter to you. Subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell to join our community of viewers who believe that every heart deserves a happy ending. Together, we're sharing stories that heal souls and remind us all that it's never too late to choose love over fear. Thank you for allowing us to share this journey with you.